Previously on Higurashi When They Cry console arcs.
なんだよこれ。なんで拳銃なんか。
Oh, you got one of your own, I see.
用心のためさ。もしもの場合に備えてね。
もしもってなんだよ。もしもって。
その時が来たらわかるよ。
なんだよそれ。
さあね。それを使う機会がないことを祈ってるよ。
Sonozaki-san apparently had nothing else to say, so she walked out the assembly hall bursting with laughter.
園崎さん。
I looked down at the gun in my hand. This isn't a toy, right? It's a real gun? I'd seen and heard about them many times in fictional contexts, but this was my first time holding a real one. After holding a gun for the first time, it felt much heavier than I imagined.
どうしてミオンさんがこんなものを。
知るかよ。
The shrine grounds were pitch black, so I couldn't see anything. At least, that should have been the case. However, contrary to my expectations, there were people just outside the window. And not only that, but our eyes met. They stared at me for a while, but as soon as I started to move, they quickly ducked down and disappeared. Every drop of blood in my body froze in an instant. My heart started pounding. I didn't have the courage to shout who's there at my adversary. On top of that, my legs were frozen. Get a hold of yourself. What are you doing? There's someone out there. I tightly clenched the gun in my hand. My palm was dripping with so much sweat that the heavy gun was likely to slip out at any moment. I cautiously peered out the window once more, but it looked like nobody was there anymore. However, when I gazed into the darkness, the signs were still there.
私見てきます。龍之介さん、援護できますか。
は？って、
For a moment, I wasn't sure what she meant. But then I was shocked when I noticed what a dark object in her hand truly was. The thing she was holding was a gun? At first, I thought she'd taken it from me. But then I verified that the gun Sonozaki-san gave me was still in my hands. Which means, the other gun must belong to Miyuki-chan?
みゆきちゃん。その銃。
説明は後です。行きましょう。
Miyuki-chan ignored my question and quietly ran toward the entryway, gun in hand. I was surprised again by how quickly her body could move.
みゆきちゃん。あんた一体何者なんだよ。
Miyuki-chan's gun clicked as she disengaged the safety in the shadow of the doorway. I was surprised once more by how skillfully her hands moved. Otoe flipped the lights in the shrine grounds all at once, then sprinted back into the assembly hall room at full speed. The enemies must have been blinded by the lights. They stopped firing for a moment. Then Miyuki-chan leapt out, charged straight forward toward a large tree out in front, took cover behind it, then quickly turned, ready to fire.
そこ！
I could hear someone groan, "Ugh," from somewhere off in the distance. Miyuki-chan continued firing. Another 3 dry sounds quickly burst out.
弾を撃つだけ無駄だよ。そう言っただろ。
Sonozaki-san dispatched the enemies, one by one. Her swordplay was as accurate as her footwork. And quick, too. The difference in strength was huge. So much so that it was easy to forget she was fighting to the death. Her combat technique was beautiful and overwhelming.
何なんだよあの人。
A man hiding behind a tree pointed his gun towards Sonozaki-san and carefully pulled the trigger.
園崎さん、危ない。
遅いんだよ。
The gun flew out of the hands of the man behind the tree. He looked on with terror in his eyes. I could see the smoke rising from Miyuki-chan's gun.
みゆきちゃん。
Not wanting to sit next to Miyuki-chan, I took a seat next to Otabe. I smiled and tried to keep up appearances. If Miyuki-chan really was a Yakuza member, I had mixed feelings about it.
大変でしたね。びっくりしたでしょう。
ああいうのって初めてだからさ。
Even though I was aware of what was going on, I had no idea how to respond, so I quickly threw together a few meaningless words. This day was full of surprises. I wasn't sure which among them was most surprising. The feeling of holding a pistol with the safety disengaged, a shootout unfolding right in front of my eyes, the existence of those men in black, Yuki-chan's true identity. Everything was far beyond surprising. I was dumbfounded.
龍之介さん、大丈夫ですか？
ああ、平気平気。
Yuki-chan gave me a dubious look, but she said nothing more. And so it continues. Greetings, my name's Neo2nd, and welcome back to my Let's Play of the Higurashi When They Cry console arcs. So, who's ready to button down the hatches at the Shrine Grounds? I know I am, especially now I know that the third party has some guns of their own, and are more than willing to use them. Might make it a bit more difficult for us to investigate things, but I mean, the way I see it, I'd say prioritizing our own survival should definitely be top priority. Let's do this. Let's get into this. Let's see what crazy hijinks we're going to be in for today. Absent-mindedly sitting on the tatami floor slowly calmed me down. My shirt was damp with sweat and humidity. What the hell happened? Just a little while ago. Little by little, the gears in my head started spinning. Sonozaki-san was sitting a short distance away, grooming the sword she had just used. Miyuki-chan was sitting next to Tawada-san like nothing had happened at all. Otabe still hadn't come back to his senses from the life-threatening shock we experienced just now. He was breathing erratically and looked like he was waiting for someone to say something. Before long, Sonozaki-san was the first to open her mouth.
そうそう。私の車のことなんだけどさ。なくなってたよ、車。
As soon as we heard that report, we all fell silent. Hey, come on. Isn't that an awfully terrible thing to just come out and say?
どういうことだよ。
だから、消えてるんだよ。確かに神社の石段を降りて、そう遠くないところに止めたはずなんだけどさ。
それって、どういうことだ？
だから、そういうことさ。私の車も鬼隠しにあったのかね。
そんな。
Sonozaki-san's laughter echoed through the quiet assembly hall. I didn't have a clue what Sonozaki-san was laughing about. Had she simply surrendered to despair? Or maybe she actually found enjoyment in the situation, being isolated from the outside world for our lives on the line.
いい加減教えてくれたっていいだろ。あんた何なんだよ。なんか俺たちに隠してることがあるんだろ。さっきの奴らどういうことなんだよ。知ってたから俺に銃なんか貸したんだろ。
I shouted in frustration. But Sonozaki-san remained silent and calmly listened to what I had to say. Her composure made me all the more irritated.
いい加減話してくれたっていいだろ。あんたが何者だかわかんねえけど、とにかくそんでもって俺らはヤクザの抗争に巻き込まれたってことなんだろ。
Still frustrated, I tossed out the theory I came up with just a little while ago. I wasn't sure how close I was to the truth, but I played my cards anyway. I was at my limit. All of our cars had vanished. Our retreat was cut off, and I wasn't the sort of person who could survive the night of life or death battle.
荒川は何の証拠があってそんなことを言ってるのかね。
証拠だって。
あのさ、荒川。あんた疲れてんだよ。少し眠ったらどうだい？
There wasn't the slightest trace of kindness or gratitude in Sonozaki-san's tone. What she meant by that was, shut up. But that wasn't enough to convince me. The fear and confusion had driven my patience beyond the limit, and even though I was terrified of Sonozaki-san till a little while ago, I burst out yelling at her.
こっちはあんたのせいで命を落としかけてんだ。説明くらいしてくれたっていいだろ。なあ、みゆきちゃん。
ええ。
大体みゆきちゃんもそうだ。君も一体何を隠してるんだ。本当にライターなのか、君は。じゃあその銃はどう説明する気なんだよ。
Miyuki-chan awkwardly looked down and scratched her head, then finished counting the number of bullets she left in the magazine of her handgun, and let out a light sigh. She told me she would explain later, but it looked like she had no interest in explaining right now. In fact, she seemed far more interested in determining how many bullets she had left.
なんなんだよ、畜生。いい加減隠し事はやめにしようぜ。みんなもうちょっと協力的になれよ。
隠し事があるのはお互い様なんじゃないのかい？
Sonozaki-san looked Otobe directly in the eyes as she said that. And when he noticed that, his shoulders slumped and he started to tremble.
どういう意味だよ。
ここにいる連中はみんな隠し事をしてる奴らばっかりってことさ。ねえ、乙部。
僕は別に何も。
Sonozaki-san looked at all of our faces, one by one, to make sure. Miyuki-chan forced a smile as she slid the magazine into the handle of her gun. Tawada-san put a hand on her chest to still its beating. What is this? What's going on? Was everyone here keeping secrets?
あんただってそうなんだろう、荒川。
はあ？俺は何も隠してなんかいないぜ。
ほー。それじゃあ聞くけど荒川、あんたこの村に何しに来たんだい？
何しにって。俺はオカルトライターなんだぜ。取材に決まってるだろうが。
まあそうだろうね。あんたの隠し事が一番罪がないかもしれないね。でもさ、あんたにはこの村でたたられるような理由、心当たりあるんだろ
Right before my eyes, my hands started trembling restlessly. They struggled to maintain their grip on the plastic bottle I was holding. A cold sweat seeped out of my armpits as she said that. What? What was the meaning of that? No way. Could she know about that? She might be baiting you into spilling something. How?
何言ってんだよ。俺には心当たりなんてねえよ。言いがかりはやめてくれ。
Sonozaki-san looked me straight in the eyes as I said that, like she was issuing me a challenge. But I couldn't endure it for more than a second, so I dodged it by taking a sip of the tea in hand.
う。なら言ってやるよ。 あんたがひなみ沢にこだわる理由。あんたの父親。ひなみ沢のやつにたたられて、死んでんだろ？
Somebody's been doing their homework. I immediately dropped the plastic bottle. How does she know about that?
図星だったようだね。あんたの親父さん。園崎の娘や生き残った少年に、一体何をしたのかね。あんたが知らないとは言わせないよ。
なんであんたがそれを。
聞いているのはこっちさね。さあ、答えてみなよ。
知らねえよ、そんなもん。俺が知るわけねえだろ。
ふーん。
Judging by Atone Tozaki-san's voice, I got the impression she enjoyed watching me get upset. I looked back at Sonozaki-san with a challenging gaze. But unfortunately, I couldn't disguise my excessively labored breathing. Sonozaki-san's eyes still had the stillness of a corpse. I'd never seen a person with eyes like that before. Honestly, it was uncanny. Long ago, my father was a reporter for a weekly photo magazine. The fierce competition between rival magazines required intense investigation in order to survive. And so, in 1983, my father interviewed a boy and a girl who were fortunate enough to survive the Hinamizawa gas disaster. The boy was the sole survivor of the school bombing incident perpetrated by another female student. Then, police brought him to Okiyamiya police station to hear his testimony about the incident. He spent the whole night there, which is why he survived the gas disaster the next day. However, he suffered intense mental trauma from losing his parents, classmates, and the entire village all at once. So the boy was hospitalized shortly thereafter. And though the girl lost her sister in the bombing incident, she escaped harm thanks to returning to her home in Okiyamiya. But she was just as traumatized as the boy. So, my father snuck into their hospitals and heavy-handedly coerced them into telling them their stories. But the boy died a few days after his interview. The cause of death was unknown, but I later heard he was killed by the curse. Not only that, but the content of those interviews included eerie and mysterious predictions, which ultimately gave more weight to the curse theory. Shortly after that, my father suffered mental instability. He was dismissed from one case after another. And in the end, he couldn't even write a coherent sentence, so they fired him. After that, he returned to his hometown and spent his days lazing about. Ultimately, he drowned to death, just as the girl he interviewed prophesized. Right. That's right. I remember. I'm certain that girl's last name was Sonozaki. So she must be a relative of this Mion Sonozaki. Many things happened after that, but in the end, my grandparents gave me my father's diary and interview materials. I took those bizarre and eerie materials, compiled them into a story about weird supernatural phenomena, and submitted it to the editorial department. That article garnered a surprisingly strong reception, and had a bit of a surge in popularity once it got posted on some news site online. That story caused the Hinamizawa occult boom to catch fire, and finally earned me a name as an occult writer. Even though my father was the one who worked so hard to gather that intel, in reality, I was the one to benefit from it. In a sense, I received all the recognition that my father should have received, but that outcome couldn't be helped. But what happened to my father when he interviewed those people from Hinamizawa? Who were those survivors my father spoke to? Even if it wasn't part of my job, I absolutely wanted to know. Wait a minute. None of your father's interview records had any information on the identities of these people? That's odd. So, I had to figure out what my father was searching for. And that was why I decided to come to Hinamizawa today.
荒川さん、どういうことですか？もしかして僕たちは今。
そんなはずあるわけねえだろ。
荒川さん、どうしたんですか？顔が真っ青ですよ。
なんでもねえよ。
My heart was pulsing like an alarm bell, and no matter how many times I sipped from my oolong tea, my throat quickly dried up. I hadn't said anything. So, how? How did Sonozaki-san know about my father?
荒川さんのお父さん、一体何をしたんですか？まさか、その人って、たたられてもおかしくないようなひどいことをしたんですか？
You're not helping maintain his mental stability, Otabe.
そんなわけねえだろ。
I turned to Otabe and spat those words out. He wanted to go throwing out accusations. Well, so did I!
それじゃ聞くけど、お前はどうなんだよ。お前だって何か隠してるんじゃねえのか？
僕は。
I pointed my spear toward Otabe and let loose. Nervous, indecisive Otabe seemed like the easiest one to attack.
僕は別に、たたられるようなことは何もないですよ。
本当か？
本当です。
Otabe turned his gaze downward and cut off the conversation. But it was clear to all of us that he was putting on an act.
へえ。
何ですか？
それじゃあ聞くけど、これは何だい？
Sonozaki-san thrust a single card right up to the tip of Otabe's nose. And it looked like a cash card. Cash card. Otabe gasped, and his eyes opened wide. Then he quickly checked his back pocket and turned toward the cash card once more. Otabe's face was starting to develop a twitch.
さっき、あんたのその尻ポケットから落ちたんだよ。もう一度聞くよ。これは誰のカードだい？
If I had to wager a guess, I'd say it belongs to one of the people in that suicide car.
それは。
この名義、あんたの名前じゃないみたいだけどね。堀千秋って書いてあるよ。誰なんだい？この千秋って人は。
Otabe nervously fidgeted as he gazed at the card. He reminded me of a small animal standing face to face with its natural predator.
ねえ、説明しておくれよ。あんたのポケットから落ちたってのに、なんで乙部の名前じゃないんだい？
おい、乙部。
Otabe's face turned completely pale. His heart was beating so hard it felt like I could hear it from the seat next to him. Sonozaki-san continued staring Otabe directly in the eyes and didn't look away for even a moment.
乙部、あんた、何を隠しているんだい？
僕は、何も。
そろそろ正直に言ったら、あの時携帯を壊したのって乙部くんだよね。
Bit by bit, Miyuki-chan continued her verbal assault. Otabe reacted sharply and looked up after each comment.
どうして乙部くんの携帯だけ壊されたのかなって ずっと気になってたんだけど、それは乙部君のだけ通じるからだよね。そういうことでいいんだよね。
そうだと思います。
それじゃあちょっと聞きたいんだけど、乙部君の携帯本当に通じたのかな？
通じましたよ。何言ってるんですか。あの時警察と話したの反町さんも聞いてましたよね。
でもちょっと変じゃない？だって園崎さんの携帯と乙部君の携帯同機種なんでしょ？同じ機種なのにどうして乙部君のだけが通じるの？
Maybe they have a different carrier?
知りませんよ。それは個体差ってやつじゃないですか。僕に言われてもそんな。
そうなの。でも本当にそんなことってあるのかな？
Otobe's lips were quivering. Yuki-chan continued putting pressure on Otobe. Her ruthless assault had even me shivering. Otobe did his best to pretend he was still calm, but his attempt was woefully unsuccessful. His labored breathing echoed throughout the entire assembly room, filling the surrounding area with a tense atmosphere.
個体差はあると思いますよ。だってさっきは確かに通じたんです。たまたまアンテナが立ったんですよ。僕にだってなんで通じたのかはわかんないですけど。
Miyuki-chan took a deep breath. My initial impression of Miyuki-chan was a lively, earnest, cute girl, was all but gone. Replaced with that was the visage of a bird of prey, stalking a small, defenseless animal.
そういうこともあるのかもしれないね。
ですよね。だから別に変でもなんでも。
Otobe's forced smile had a light twitch to it. He must have misunderstood what Miyuki-chan was saying and believed she was convinced. Or maybe he's trying to tell himself that? However, Miyuki-chan wasn't about to let Otobe escape. In fact, she was luring him to the final stage.
ああ、そうそう。
This isn't even my final retort.
一つこの村全域で県外なのよ。
Well, that would pretty much... Yeah, you're fucked. You're truly fucked.
こんな無人の村に中継機なんていらないもの。この村に元からあった中継機が反応したなんて言い訳はできないよ。ここが封鎖されたのは昭和58年。その頃には携帯なんて使っている村人はいなかったからね。
そんな、そこまで最初から知ってたんなら、どうして。
正直に言ってくれるのを待ってたから。追い込むのって好きじゃないの。本当はね。でももうそんな悠長なことも言っていられない。じゃあ、もう一度確認します。電話、通じてなかったんだよね。
はい。
That was all Otobe could say in response. Otobe dejectedly bowed his head. That gesture was an admission of defeat.
すみませんでした。僕、嘘をついてました。
Yes, go on.
携帯は反町さんの言う通り、僕のも繋がりませんでした。繋がってるふりをしていただけです。
それじゃ通報したってのは。
嘘です。電話が通じているふりをしたんです。
Otobe continued looking down as he said that, and thanks to that, his face looked like a misbehaving child.
通報したってのがここを乗り切ればなんとかできるって。
おいおい、ちょっと待てよ。それじゃそのキャッシュカードは本当にお前が盗んだもんなのか？
はい、
お前。
すみませんでした。せめてお金を下ろすまでは警察に知られたくなくて。
だから携帯を壊したってのか？
はい、僕の携帯も繋がらないってことをバレるのが怖くなって、それでもう隠し通せないと思って。
隠しているのはそれだけじゃないでしょ。キャッシュカードをどこで盗んだの？もう隠し事はやめようよ。
Otobe drooped even further down as Miyuki-chan asked that in a scathing tone. He drooped more and more, until he couldn't go any further.
乙部、全部話しちまいなよ。あんたがどうしてそんなにビクビク怯えてばっかりなのかさ。
それは僕は
After a long pause, Otobe started saying "I'm sorry" over and over. I haven't voiced this until now, but it was sometime during the last episode I started to gradually come up with a theory regarding Otobe's involvement with the suicide car. I think those people in the car were his friends. And considering that the state that we found them in, how they seemingly died due to smoke inhalation from that charcoal grill inside the car, and they all seemingly had peaceful expressions on their faces. When we found them dead, I think it was. I'm starting to wonder if everybody in that car, including Otobe, were actually part of a suicide pact of sorts, and they came to Hinamizawa specifically to all commit group suicide. But maybe at the last minute, Otobe chickened out and left his friends behind to their fate, or something like that. And ever since then, he's been trying to keep the truth of his involvement with said group a secret because, well, admitting that you were part of a suicide pact would not exactly be an easy thing to admit to pretty much anybody. See if I'm right. Now that he's finally spilling his guts. The sound echoed miserably here and there, some sobbing mixed in.
ごめんなさい。
だから何がごめんなさいなんだよ。
僕は最低です。どうしようもないダメなやつなんです。
Huge tears started accumulating in Otobe's eyes and spilling to the ground. Sonozaki-san gently stroked his trembling shoulder and urged him on in a voice filled with tenderness, as deep as the ocean.
何があったか話してごらんよ。
はい。僕が東京に出てきたのは去年の春でした。
Otobe quietly began talking about his past. I never thought of myself as the kind of person who would stay in the countryside forever. My father was a government worker and my mother was a housewife. Everyone in the area was acquainted with everyone else. Amidst their strict values and well-defined human relationships, there was one value that was absolutely essential to survival. cooperation. I was worried I'd spend the rest of my life in such a tiny world, so I felt desperate. I couldn't see anything in my future. No dreams to aspire to. My father tried to get me a job at a local company, but I hated it. I figured I could probably work things out if I went to Tokyo. So I poured my heart and soul into studying, then took an entrance exam for a university in Tokyo.
アキラ、東京なんか行ったってあんたみたいな田舎者は相手にされないよ。地元で地道に働いて真面目なお嫁さんを見つけて可愛い孫をいっぱい作って父さんを喜ばせてやんな。
そういう生き方って僕には向いてないと思うんだ。
アキラ、
決めたんだ。受かったら僕、東京の大学に進学する。もしも受かんなかったら、その時は地元で母さんの言う通りにするからさ。
And then, I got accepted. It was some university I'd never heard of. But it was in college in Tokyo, so that was good enough for me.
受かったんなら母さんは応援するよ。しっかりやってきなさいよ。
Even though I expected my mother to be opposed. For some reason, she was pleased. Although I intended to work to pay my tuition, my mother talked to my father about it, and in the end, they decided to pay for my tuition and living expenses.
しっかり勉強してこい。一生に一度くらい地元を離れてみるのもいいかもしれんしな。
To be honest, I couldn't believe my father would say something like that. But they had a good reason for supporting me. I understood that. My parents were convinced I'd return to the country in the future. Traveling to Tokyo was just a momentary event. Just a little longer than a vacation. That way of thinking was what allowed them to send me off. The money my parents gave me was like a chain shackled to my ankle. A debt to be repaid. They saw it as an investment, so that I'd be forced to return to the countryside right away if they were to ever take it away. But I wouldn't stand for that. I had no intention of ever going back there. I intended to plant my roots in Tokyo once I got out of college.
アキラ、しっかり勉強してくるのよ。早く一人前になって父さんに楽をさせてやんなさいよ。
今まで世話になりました。母さん。
アキラ、何堅苦しいこと言ってんのよ。とにかく東京はいろいろ大変だろうけど頑張んなさいよ。
言われなくても頑張るよ。じゃあね、母さん。
Mom came all the way to the local station to see me off, but I coldly sent her away. The countryside, my parents, I cast them all aside. I took the first step toward my ambitions. Everything in Tokyo felt fresh. Unlike high school, I didn't have to go to class early in the morning. They offered lectures in the afternoon and the evening. And it was easy to skip class and have a classmate answer the roll call in my place. The city was nothing like how my parents complained about it. Instead, it was full of fashionably dressed girls and classmates who felt far more worldly than me. And there were trendy shops and amusement districts. Though I didn't have to pay for tuition, I did start working a part-time job to help cover my living expenses. Every day, I'd wake up around noon, spend some time at the university, then work my part-time job until the evening. My co-workers taught me all kinds of things. How to drink, how to dance at clubs, how to ask girls out. After spending time with them, I started to develop an inferiority complex compared to my classmates. I felt like a child. My co-workers introduced me to all kinds of girls. Shortly after starting college, I began going out with a girl living in a luxury apartment complex in Aoyama. Or Aoyama? She had a long, slender neck, like a giraffe. She dressed to match cutting-edge trends and wore lots of expensive accessories. She felt like a real Tokyo girl, and I liked that about her. But she was an expensive girl. She worked at a cabaret club, so she brought in far more income than me, but she never opened her wallet for anything. Meals and entertainment were always on me. I believe that's a man's responsibility. Well, I mean, if you're content to be this lady's free meal ticket, you'd go right ahead, I guess. Shopping was one of her favorite pastimes, so I'd buy something for her any time we went anywhere together. I bought her all kinds of matching clothes. I was surprised to learn they even made t-shirts that cost 50,000 yen a piece. But I was also impressed that there were people in Tokyo who could drop 50,000 yen on something like that. And she bought those expensive t-shirts without a second thought. She said that she wanted me to wear it, so I bought one for myself too. I thought about how flimsy these t-shirts could cost, could cost 50,000. And my heart ached to know that an entire week's worth of pay would go into a single t-shirt. That is just a phenomenally stupid financial investment, my friend. I'm sorry. But you deserve whatever consequences ensued from this. The store clerk recommended some cool-looking clothes that matched the t-shirt, so I even bought some jeans and a sweater to go along with it. Since my feet were in the door, I bought some matching boots too. Combined with the jeans, t-shirt, and sweater, it came to a total of nearly 300,000 yen. When I pulled out my wallet to pay for all those clothes, I noticed it looked shabby too, so she and I went to a discount shop and bought a brand name leather wallet. Christ, all this money you're spending. And then I noticed how much my worn-out, cheap watch illustrated my meager upbringing. I was prepared to dive in head first by that point, so I bought a brand-name watch from a pawn shop. Oh my god, this is a tale as old as time, I swear. Spending money and money that you don't have to spend, and dealing with the inevitable consequences. So I'm just curious, how much of this money did you spend came out of the money that your parents were giving you for schooling and all that? I felt 2 or 3 times as cool as any time I was around her. I felt like I was being reborn, and it felt good. I was no longer the pathetic Akira Otobe who was harassed by his friends and always fought with his parents. I was a completely new Akira Otobe, full of youthful freedom, who took cute girls and cool clothes out in a constantly changing world of Tokyo. That's what I wanted to be. I ended up going to school less and less often. I stopped talking to my classmates and spent more time with my coworkers. And when I did occasionally go to class, I had no idea what any of it meant. And I no longer had friends to ask questions. I didn't enter college to study in the first place. So, I finally stopped going to school at all. However, living above my means was really hard. No matter how much I worked, how much I spent on clothes, how much I treated myself to luxurious meals and kept up my appearances, somewhere deep down I still felt empty. Well, living a very shallow surface level lifestyle like this will certainly do that to you. In order to fill that void, I kept spending time with my girlfriend, and I kept earning money at my part-time job. In order to be the Akira Otobe I wanted to be, I needed money. It didn't take long before I started taking out small loans to get the money for these activities. Oh, you even got the loan sharks involved. Oh, you poor, stupid son of a bitch. And oh, that's what that tip was about. I see now. My parents transferred money each month to pay for rent, but I started using that to pay the debts that were piling up left and right. I'd accumulated debts 10 times that amount. Jesus Christ, 10 times? I even borrowed money to repay my debts. You're making all the amateur mistakes with this stuff.
君の人間性を信じて無担保で100万円貸してあげますよ。でも言っときますけど、こういうことは今回だけですからね。君だからこそ貸すんです。君は根は真面目で才能もあるんだから。君なら返せると思うから、これだけの金を無担保で貸すんです。君だからこそ。
Invited by those sweet words, I turned to street money and black market lending. The compound interest continued to accumulate, and the outcome was inevitable. I fled the apartment I was living in under the cover of night. I lost contact with my girlfriend around that time. Did you sign her off as a co-signer for this debt by any chance? Or did you do that to your parents? Eventually, collections agents started coming to my school and part-time job, so I had no choice but to find a new job. I cycled through several jobs after that. I couldn't work in a single place for long, or the collections agents would find me. I didn't have a place to call my own, so I couldn't make friends at work either. Nobody was interested in talking to a debt-ridden person like me in the first place. But even if I worked morning until night and only spent the rest of my time sleeping, I couldn't raise more than 300,000 yen in a month. There was nothing I could do to keep up with the interest compounding each month, much less make payments toward the principal. No matter how hard I worked, and even if a wage increase of 10 yen per hour, it did little to reduce my debt. So I calculated how long it would take to repay my debt, living like this. 70 years. What do you even say to this? God damn. I couldn't go back to college. I wasn't able to attend a single class, so I couldn't get any credit. If I leave the university, I won't be able to find a job. It's not impossible to get a proper job as a high school graduate, but it had already been so long since I graduated that I couldn't do it. There was no way to explain that gap after entering college. And even if I could get a real job, collections agents would show up there and ruin it soon enough. I couldn't talk to my parents. My parents would be shocked, outraged, and abusive. Well, I mean, would you blame them? Really? In the end, they forsake me. My father would beat me, and my mother would coldly watch. They'd shout, "We believed in you," with tears in their eyes. It was plain to see what would happen back at home. I didn't want to go back to the countryside. In other words, I had no choice but to live my life jumping between part-time jobs, paying just 800 yen per hour. I'll spend my entire lifetime trying to repay a debt that can't be repaid in a lifetime. That crushing sense of vain effort caused me to give up on working altogether. Well, call me a bastard for saying this if you must, but you got yourself into this mess, so really, you've got no one to blame here but yourself. That's just the cold hard truth of the matter. What awaited me afterwards was a life of peering out of the shut curtains of my tiny 4.5 anatomy-sized apartment, make sure there weren't any collections agents between here and the convenience store 30 meters away. I couldn't go shopping if collection agents were out there. I'd keep quiet and spend the rest of my day at home. And traveling more than 30 meters away was out of the question. There was a risk I'd get kidnapped if the collections agents found me. I even hesitated to step out of my apartment to take the trash out in fear of collections agents wandering around. Then I finally realized my life had reached a deadlock. I still had the same cell phone number, but I had no desire to check the incoming messages. More than 20 messages arrived on the answering machine every day.
お金貸すとき、生命保険に入ってもらったよね。ご遺族には迷惑がかからないようにするからさ。意味、わかるでしょ？
Crystal.
いつまでも逃げられると思うなよ。とりあえずさ、連絡くれない？いい稼ぎ先紹介するよ。黙って言う通りにしてくれるだけで、うちの利子はチャラになるからさ。利子だけだけど。
もしもし、アキラ？
How's my girlfriend's voice?
ご無沙汰。久しぶりにアキラが住んでたマンションに行ってみたけど、どうなってんの？
I didn't detect a hint of concern about me in her voice. Well, I mean, given what she helped inspired you to do, with you in regards to you developing reckless spending habits, I couldn't have imagined she really cared about you all that much. So, I mean, yeah. She probably found a new boyfriend after she got sick of me, but she got sick of him too, and that's why she's calling me. I had a feeling that was the case. Friends are disposable. I remember her saying that once before. Well, I mean, if that... And yet you dated her anyway. You got a lousy taste in women, too. She goes out with people when they're convenient for her, and replaces them as soon as they become inconvenient. According to her, we live in an ever-changing era, so there's no way to know who might drop out of your life or when. You have to keep a watchful eye to ensure people who were left behind don't hold you back. Sound life advice. I'm being sarcastic, of course. In order to avoid falling victim to bad situations, it's important to always check the people you deal with to ensure they're worth keeping in touch with.
いろいろ大変そうだけど、頑張ってね。じゃあね。
That was all she said in her message. There was no concern for me at all. No sign of her reaching out a helping hand. Something bad happened, so it's best to keep her distance. That was the conclusion she reached. In other words, she was cutting me off entirely. I had already served my purpose. As far as she was concerned, I was dead weight. Even though the two of us went to all those places together. Even though we walked through all those places together, holding hands. I clenched at one of those 50,000 yen t-shirts I only bought because it matched hers. 50,000 yen for this? It wasn't just 50,000 yen, you dummy. This lifestyle was the price of that? And I was attracted to someone like her? Yeah, you were. I held the t-shirt against my face and sobbed. I felt miserable and ashamed. But all I could do was cry. Deep down, I realized I had wasted my life on meaningless things. As I continued sobbing, I pressed the play button on the answering machine once more.
あきら、友達が金貸せるかもって言ってるけど、どうする？利子ちょっと高いけど。
KC スポーツクラブですが、会費が3ヶ月分未納となりましたため、大会手続きを取らせていただきました。未納分につきましては、
加賀内学事務局ですが、次期履修予定表が未提出になっています。至急大学へ。
居酒屋100万石の店長やけど、お前もう来んでええわ。無断欠勤はうちは速攻でクビなんや。てめえ、世間を舐めたらあかんで。
None of it mattered. These were people I thought I was close to, people I respected, people I believed would offer to help if I was in trouble. But every one of them turned their noses up at me. The reality of that was difficult to bear alone. Except you are the one that put yourself into a situation where you had to hide your sorry butt in your tiny little apartment in order to avoid the collections agents. So, your constant absences at work, at school, and all that, I mean, that's all your fault. So don't pin this on them. This is all you. But it couldn't be helped. I brought this on myself. Thank you! This was the price of the selfish life I'd been living. Nobody would lend a helping hand to someone like me. Everyone will look down on me for putting up a fake front. I pushed everyone away, so I don't have any friends left. And then, the last message on the answering machine was...
アキラ、元気でやってるの？
It was a familiar voice.
母さ
ん。電話は繋がらないし、手紙を出しても戻ってきちゃうし。あんた元気でやってるの？
My chest tightened. What? After all this time? I kept gazing at the flashing button on the answering machine. I should have been disgusted to hear my mom's voice. But as soon as I did, tears came overflowing. Even though I despise so many things about my mom. What is this? Why am I crying? Mom always tried to do whatever Dad wanted, and she was always good at reading his mood. So, Mom always tried to control me to meet Dad's whim. Say this to improve Dad's mood, do that to make Dad happy, but don't do anything he wouldn't like. My father said that men had no use for literature, so he only ever bought me scientific journals. Clearly not a man of culture, this guy. Even though I liked geography, my father believed that history was more important, so he forced me to learn Japanese history. He'd said that music wasn't suitable for men, so I had to abandon the woodwind concert ensemble I had wanted to enter ever since elementary school. In the end, I joined the Kendo Club, but it didn't suit me at all. I just wasn't very good, so my upperclassmen bullied me over my lack of drive to improve. I lost all my self-confidence, so I started acting more timid and distancing myself from my classmates. The boys made fun of me all the time, and the girls constantly giggled at me behind my back. Yeah, I still remember those miserable days in the countryside. I don't want to go back there, ever again. But I can't stay here either. I have nowhere to go.
父さんは電話なんかしなくていいって言ってたけど、やっぱり気になるからちょっとだけ。ねえ、東京はどう？真面目に勉強してるの？たまにはあんたの声聞かせてちょうだいよ。
As if I could call them. No matter why she called, I decided it was best not to tell her about how I was feeling.
あんたの夢ってのが何なのか、母さんにはわからないけど、頑張んなさいよ。あんた、頑張ればできるんだから。母さんはいつでもあんたの味方よ。
That can't be true. Even though I thought that, I still wanted to believe in my mother's love. Mom will always be there for me. Is that really true? Was she actually trying to encourage me? And please help me, Mom. I don't know what to do. And it's painful. Please help.
父さんはまだあんたのこと怒ってるけど、ちゃんとしたあんたを見たらきっと認めてくれるはずだからさ。頑張ってね、アキラ。
メッセージは以上です。もう一度聞くには1を、保存するには。
I erased all the messages and stared at the phone. My vision was fogged over with tears. If you could see me living a respectable life, it was no longer possible for me to live a proper life. Where did I go wrong? Well, to be blunt about it, where you went wrong was with you trying a little bit too hard to impress your superficial lady friend, and well, there you go. What was it I wanted? I felt so miserable, I truly wanted to die. I thought I was special. I didn't have a dream or a concrete something to work towards, but I swore back then I would try my best. But I never found an opportunity like that. When I first came to Tokyo, I felt like I was reborn as a different person. I was completely ecstatic. Somewhere deep in my heart, I realized I was living a depraved life. But I thought I could pay back the money I borrowed if I could find something to be passionate about. But I wasn't someone special. I couldn't find anything to be passionate about. Do your best, Akira. Mom's words echoed inside my ears. Mom, I can't go back now. And I can't go forward either. Thinking that and feeling completely helpless, I stepped outside for the first time in ages and felt the raindrops strike me. And when I came to my senses, I was on the internet and I had reached a specific site. Did you see the issue of the Weekly 7? It mentions an occult spot called Hinamizawa Village. I don't think they'd find us in a place like that. What do you think? I've read the Weekly 7. Sounds good. It mentioned the gas disaster happened in June, so there should be even fewer people around then. How about the second Monday in June? If you can, I'm sure the weather will be nice. There's Chiaki. I hope it'll go well this time. Is it okay to do this with just 3 people? Somewhere out there, I felt something resembling human warmth. And when I noticed that, I wrote too. I'd like to come too. Looking forward to it. I let out a huge sigh after writing that. Death would be more appropriate for someone like me. I no longer cared about being alive.
そうして集まった仲間は3人。僕を入れて4人で、ひなみざわ村で一緒に死のうということになりました。
One of the lights in the assembly hall started to flicker erratically. Nevertheless, Otbe completely ignored the light bulb and continued his story.
しかし、参るよな。 俺の書いた特集が自殺場所を決める決定打になるなんてよ。やりきれないぜ。
Well, looks like I was right on the money on this one too.
すみません。
それじゃもしかして、あの3人が乗っていた車に、お前も乗ってたのかよ。
はい。
Otobe continued drooping apologetically as he nodded to me.
死にに来たのに、変な言い方かもしれないですけど、僕、楽しかったんです。
は？
みんな、いい人ばっかりだったんです。今日、いえ、日付が変わったから、もう昨日、とにかく、昨日初めて会ったのに、ずいぶん前から友達同士だったみたいな気がしたんです。
Otobe began speaking once more, and nobody tried to interrupt him. The sky was nice and blue that day, just like Machi-chan wanted. We all lived fairly far apart, so in the end we decided to meet at Tokyo Station. The first time I came to Tokyo Station, back in last spring, was when I felt my first taste of the city. Businessmen dressed in fancy suits, and gorgeous office ladies that looked like they belonged in magazines were hanging out at exotic foreign coffee shops, and the station was surrounded by tall, stylish buildings. The clamor of people was like the omnipresent background noise of an urban area. But now I was able to recognize that every last one of them had no bearing on my life. Back then, everything was shining bright. But now, it all looked so dingy. All the things I once longed for were ostentatious phonies.
はじめまして、あっくんこと芥川です。
Akkun, huh? The man smiling and bowing his head in front of the car was, surprisingly, a man roughly in his 40s. He had a gentlemanly aura, like the businessmen from around here. A man like him wants to commit suicide? I couldn't hide my surprise.
マチこと、マチコです。短いお付き合いだけど、マチって呼んでね。
Machi-chan looked like she was still in her teens. She was wearing really pretty makeup, but she was probably still in high school. Her skin was shiny, and she had a miniskirt stretched across her slender legs. She seems like a perfectly normal girl, the likes of which you'd find anywhere. Why would a girl like her?
私は千秋。本当の名前も千秋で、ハンドルネームと一緒なの。
Chiaki-san bashfully said that. She was a beautiful woman in her late 20s. She had a gentle demeanor and gave off the atmosphere of someone living a wealthy lifestyle. She was dressed in nicely tailored clothes like me, but her elegance and dignity were out of this world. She felt like a platinum level, truly refined lady.
どうも。僕が乙部です。
As I bowed my head, I looked around to make sure no collections agents were nearby.
そんなに不安がらなくても大丈夫だよ、乙部くん。みんな死ぬのは初めてなんだ。
You say that like it's something that people can experience more than once. Atagawa-san could tell I was feeling nervous, so he gave me a reassuring smile as he said that. He thinks I'm afraid to die, but the truth is, I'm not scared at all. Well, the fact that you're alive here and now tells me that you probably did get scared at one point. The fact that I was going to die soon actually had me feeling excited. I was feeling more stressed about my first real-life meeting with my internet friends. I was about to get in a car with strangers and go somewhere. But I was happy to go in with other people, rather than on my own. Eventually, the car took off with Atukagawa-san behind the wheel. I took the passenger seat and the ladies were in the back seats. Even though I was in the passenger seat, I ducked my head down to avoid being spotted by any debt collectors who might be looking at the car. I was able to raise my head and feel some peace of mind after the car got up to a decent speed. Chiaki-san held some sweets out to me.
よかったら食べて。うちの近所のパティスリーのなんだけど、結構美味しいのよ。
どうも。
You run a bakery? The candy was full of butter and brandy. Very tasty. The flavor itself was great, of course, but it was a nice feeling too. Sharing something tasty with someone else. That alone was enough to remind me what it was like to experience happiness.
私もチョコだけどいいかな。
I received a chocolate from Machi-chan. It must have been foreign chocolate because the package was in English. It looked nice and sticky on the inside too. This was the first time I ever tasted chocolate like that. Was it a truffle?
すっごく甘いでしょ。でも食べるとハマっちゃうんだよね。安かったから箱買いしちゃったんだ。そうしたらすっごく余っちゃって。もう一個どう？
Machi-chan said that gleefully and handed me another. Her smile was bright and carefree. I never thought someone could smile that earnestly about eating junk food.
いい天気だね。晴れてよかった。最後の日だからお天気くらいせめて味方してほしいよね。
Once he said that, I remembered we were on our way to die. It didn't feel real. I fiddled with my phone. No incoming calls today. Do your best, Akira. Mom's voice echoed inside my ears again. I hadn't received a call from my parents since then. And of course, I didn't have the courage to call them back. Do your best, Akira. If she had said, please come home, instead of do your best back then.
そんなに携帯が気になるのかい?
After playing with my phone in the passenger seat all this time, Atogawa-san called out to me.
いえ。
最後に声を聞きたい人がいるのなら、電話してみれば？
いいんです。そんな人いないし。
そう？時間はまだあるんだから、気にしなくてもいいのよ。
大丈夫です。本当に、もう。
I powered off my cell phone. Eventually, the car pulled into Shishiboni City and began climbing the mountain road.
そろそろだね。
Machi-chan reapplied her mascara and touched up her lipstick. Why are you prettying yourself up for dying? I mean, what? You gonna seduce the Grim Reaper or something? Her face looked radiant, like she was all set for a date with her lover. After arriving in Hinamizawa, we parked the car in a suitable location and started making preparations. Even up until this point, it felt like a fun group project.
幽霊出ないね。死者の村って言うからちょっと期待したのにな。死んだ家族に会えるかもって。でもどっちみちもうすぐ会えるんだけどね。
家族死んじゃったんですか？
うん。
After that one word from Machi-chan, everyone began sharing their personal stories. I was surprised to hear it. Everyone had their own tragic episodes that drove them to suicide. Machi-chan lost her entire family. Atogawa-san was saddled with the debt of others. Chiaki-san lost her husband. All of them did everything in their power to keep going before turning to suicide. I, on the other hand, was full of myself and did whatever I liked. I just fooled around for my own satisfaction and suffered the consequences of my actions. I was ashamed. Honestly, I was so ashamed.
夫にもっとしてあげられることがあったんじゃないかって。一番大切な時期にそばにいてあげられなくてごめんなさいってどうしても伝えたい。どれだけお金を稼いでも使えなかったら意味がないものね。
Chiaki-san reached into her handbag as she said that.
あの人が事業で成功して得たものよ。私にはもう必要ないから届けてあげようと思って。
She pulled a bank book, a signature stamp, and a cash card out of her bag. My eyes fixated on those items. I heard a faint voice inside my head. This is what he gained from all his tireless work? Just how much is in there? With that money, could I start all over?
体がボロボロになるまで働いて、結局あの人、過労がたたって死んじゃったの。そんなに頑張らなくてもいいのよって伝えればよかったのに。私、見て見ぬふりをしてた。あの人が稼いだお金で楽な暮らしをしながら、あの人が仕事にかまけて私との時間をないがしろにしていることを恨んでさえいた。私、妻失格だったのね。
今から別の人と結婚してもう一度やり直せるんじゃないんですか。
え？
Even though I knew I was speaking out of place, I couldn't help but say something. That's not something worth dying over, is it? Because that was enough money to keep on living, without bothering anyone. I don't have anything, and there's nothing else I can do, so I chose to die. And yet, why?
乙部君、そういうことは。
いいえ、いいのよ。私が愛していたのはあの人だけ。これからももう誰も愛するつもりはないし、死んであの世であの人のためだけに生きていきたいの。今度は夫婦で手を握り合ってずっと寄り添っていたい。
Chiaki-san interrupted Atagawa-san to say all that. Chiaki-san was about to die with all that wealth. My heart was beating like mad while I listened to her story. Start over. With that money, I could pay off my debts and start a new life. As I listened to Chiaki-san's story on the road to death, a feeling of hope started to emerge inside me.
それじゃあ今度は乙部君の話を聞こうか。
はい。
Before I realized it, it was my turn to share my story. But now my heart was bursting with hope. I no longer had a reason for wanting to die. I wasn't sure exactly how much she had, but with all the wealth Chiaki-san had right there, with that money, I could start over. Yeah, well, what if it's still not enough? Yes. I don't want to die. 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 Not when I still have a chance. My selfish desire to live. My pathetic, ridiculous desire to see another day. Haunted by those thoughts, I struggled to force a smile and painfully bit down on my tongue.
無理に話すことないわ。もうおしまいにしましょうよ。乙部くん、全部もうすぐ終わるから、ようやく苦しみから解放されるの。
はい。
That was all I could say. I still didn't want to die. I wasn't so attached to living until just now.
それじゃあみんなあっちで会おう。
さようなら。芥川さん、乙部くん、まちちゃん、短い間だったけどありがとう。
さようなら。
That's right. I can start over. I can start everything over. I can still do it. The sunset stained the sky a deep red. I could hear the cry of the Higurashi coming through the door. Machi-chan said she was glad it was sunny. Chiaki-sen said this was the perfect place to die. Atigawa-sen said we'll meet on the other side. Seriously. Sure, it's nice weather. What's so great about that? This is a vacant area without any people nearby. That's probably the worst place to die. And meet on the other side? Still too soon for me! And after everyone fell asleep, I climbed out of the car alone. Outside, the sunset shined down on the thick gray clouds in the sky. And in no time, the surrounding area was covered in darkness. Impossible to tell right from left. But all I could think about was tightly holding the property I took from Chiaki-san as I ran down the pitch black mountain road.
でも、車を出て、すぐに雨が降ってきて、道がぬかるんで、何度も転んで、そして、真っ暗闇を駆け回っているうちに、道に迷ってしまったんです。
And then eventually, you ran into Mion. Wow. I was expecting his sudden reason for wanting to continue living was just based on something more primal. Like his body reacting to struggling to survive as he starts suffocating or something like that. Something simple like that, but no. Turns out his newfound reason for living was a lot more selfish than that. I glanced at my watch. It was 2 a.m. 5 men and women gathered together in this assembly hall with a broken light bulb. One of them surrounded by the remaining 4, as if to condemn him for his stupid mistakes.
それで走っているうちに木の根っこか何かにつまずいて崖から転がり落ちて私と会ったってわけかい。
そうです。
それじゃあ車が消えて友達とはぐれたっていうのは嘘なのね。
はい、すみません。ごめんなさい。
あの自殺者たちは全員お前の知り合いってことか。
はい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさ
い。なんてこった。
借金がかさみ、安易に自殺を選んだ。しかも仲間の通帳を持って。 逃げた。
Sonozaki-san stood up. Then she donned a more harsh expression than she had worn until now, and spoke up.
まったくもって不甲斐ない。最低だね、あんた。
すみませんでした。
Otebe fell down on his face on the spot, his shoulders trembling. In that moment, all the tears strung across his face spilled down onto the floor.
ごめんなさい。本当にごめんなさい。
待てよ。それじゃ黒沢をさらったのもこいつが。
I too looked down at Otebe with disgust. But as soon as he realized the meaning of my words, he fiercely looked up at his face still littered in tears.
僕は知りません。黒沢さんのことは何も。
バカかお前。そんなこと信じられるか。平気で嘘をついたり死人の金を盗んだりするような奴の言うことなんて信用できるかよ。
Why would he lie now, Arakawa?
でも僕は本当に知らないんです。ミオンさん、信じてください。僕は本当に何も。
ああ、わかってるよ、それくらい。あんたみたいな弱虫に生きている人間を捕まえて殺して隠すなんて芸当できるわけがない。
ですね。
Miyuki-chan clearly agreed with Sonozaki-san. Why? How can the two of them be so sure of that? What makes them so confident? Miyuki-chan was gazing straight at Tawada-san. Her expression made it look like she was silently questioning her.
Tawada-san.
Oh, wow. Well, save for like one or two little details relating to what we just heard, I pretty much guessed right as to his involvement with the suicide car.
そこちょっとどいてもらってもいいですか。
Tawada-san was sitting in front of the closet door. The closest door, excuse me. Where did I get closet from? She began trembling for a moment, but she quickly mustered a smile and tilted her head.
反町さん、どうしたんですか？
あなたも隠し事をしてますよね。
Did you kill your boyfriend? Did his callous attitude finally drive you over the edge and you decide to murder him out of spite? Miyuki-chan nonchalantly asked that, but it didn't seem like she was seeking answers. In fact, it seemed like she wanted to confirm something she already knew. Once again emphasizing how little I understood this person called Miyuki-chan. She spoke in a calm tone, with a lovely smile. But the words she uttered had a bit of venom beneath them. It reminded me of a snake slowly strangling its prey. And her eyes were shining like the blade of a finely sharpened knife.
大したことじゃないです。その場所、どいてみてくれませんか？
はい。
Her tone sounded intimidating. It was hard to believe that voice came from someone with such a gentle face. And Tawada-san quickly rose to her feet under the pressure. However, even though she stood up, she didn't move from that spot.
みゆきちゃん、どうしたの？
見ればわかりますよ。 押し入れの中に何が入っているか。ねえ、十和田さん。
何なんです？何が入ってると言うんですか？
見ればわかりますから。だからどいてください。
反町さん、何を根拠にそんなこと。
話をそらさないで。それとも私に全部言わせたいの
Towa-san did her best to resist Miyuki-chan's frightening glare. But that sharp gaze was too much for her to bear, so she couldn't find the words to respond. But even so, she maintained her position in front of the closet and refused to move aside.
話せる？話してくれたらこれ以上は私も詮索しないけど、どう？
だから何を
The two of them fiercely glared at one another from point-blank range. And then, Miyuki-chan let out a brief sigh, shook her head, and casually adjusted her hair as she continued.
そう。じゃあ仕方ないわね。私が説明してあげる。恋人の黒沢くんの行方。あなた、本当は知ってるんじゃない？
どうして私が？それに、それが押し入れとどう関係があるんですか？
さっき見えたんだよ。そこの押し入れの中に人間の手首があるのさ。
Oh, great. She killed him and she severed his limbs. Not good. Definitely not good. The moment Sonozaki-san chimed in, Towa-san gasped. And then, Miyuki-chan's facial expression didn't change at all, like she already knew. Hey, wait a minute. A human hand? In that closet? You can't be serious. Why would someone like that be in this closet?
どういうことだよ。そんな、なんだよ、手首って。ここにあるってのか？おい。
I rose to my feet, pushed Towa-san aside, and put a hand on the sliding door. I could see her gasping face out of the corner of my eye, but that didn't matter now. A hand? Can't be. There's no way a person could be hiding inside there. Several comforters were neatly stacked in the upper shelf, and multiple futons were carefully folded on the bottom shelf. I looked for this human hand, but couldn't see it anywhere.
なんだよ。手なんてどこにもないじゃん。
I felt relieved. Indeed, there's no way a human hand would be in a place like that, right? You're not looking hard enough. What were the two of them talking about?
ミオンさん、どういうことですか？手首が見えてるって。
さあね。見たから見たって言ったまでさ。それに私は、あんたが犯人だなんて一言も言ってないよ。
見間違えたんじゃないですか？こんなところに人間の手があったら、さっき私が毛布を出した時に見つけてますから。
そうかしら。
Miyuki-chan stared back at Towa-san. Her eyes were bitterly cold.
龍之介さん、ちょっといいですか？
Miyuki-chan pushed me aside and stood directly in front of the closet. Then she carefully pulled the comforters down, one by one. Excuse me.
やめてくださいよ。布団を出すなら私がやりますから。
布団を出したいんじゃないからいいの。
にして。さっきからあなた、一体。
As Miyuki-chan pushed Tawada-san aside, she reached into the bedding and hit something. Then, she turned to look at the girl for a moment, before pulling out the comforter. The next moment, hanging there, something fell out of the space between the futons, and it was a pale human hand?
なんだよこれ。
Miyuki-chan grabbed the hand and pulled without a second thought. Given its position, it required an incredible amount of force to pull it out. Before long, I heard the owner of that hand tumbling down to the floor.
こいつ、
そんな。
His face. It was Kurosawa, the man who was sleeping here just a little while ago. Tawada-san turned and screamed. She covered her mouth with both her hands and stared down with a look of bewilderment in her eyes.
どうして？なんで？こんなところに匠くんが。どうして？匠くん！
Don't play dumb. Within a moment, Tawada-san was clinging to Kurosawa, but he didn't respond to her call. His head and hands drooped with no strength behind them, and he didn't move at all.
そんな、匠くんが。
Tawada-san continued clinging to Kurosawa as she cried out, but his face was pale and didn't move a muscle. He was clearly dead.
十和田さん、どうしてこんなことに。
まさか本当に人が死ぬなんて。
However, two sets of eyes were staring intently at Tawada-san. Sonozaki-san, and Miyuki-chan, and Neo-chan, or Kun, I guess. Yeah, I meant to say Kun.
みゆきちゃん。
そのくらいで気が済んだ。
ちょっとみゆきちゃん。恋人が死んで悲しんでるってのに、いくらなんでもその言い草はないんじゃねえの？
She's putting on an act, you dummy.
随分冷たいんですね。
You too, dummy. Otebe watched on, spoken in an admonishing tone. However, Miyuki-chan didn't respond to either of us, beyond a distorted smile on the edge of her lips.
まあ、冷血呼ばわりは甘んじて受けましょう。十和田さん、この死体、ちょっと調べさせてもらうわよ。
Without giving Tawada-san an opportunity to refuse, Miyuki-chan put her hands on Kurosawa's corpse and started checking his pupils. She was like a professional handling an autopsy. Sonozaki-san approached the body too, and began examining his face. But then, their eyes slowly turned to Tawada-san.
とりあえず気が済んだかい？じゃあ質問だけど、あんた最初から知ってたんだろう？黒沢匠の死体がここにあることをさ。
は
あ？Otebe and I both raised our voices in surprise. Then, Tawada-san emphatically gasped and opened her eyes wide in shock.
どうなんだい？正直に言ってみな。
そんなわけ でしょ。匠くんがいなくなってずっと私
隠し事はやめにしようってみんなでさっき話し合ったじゃないか。
冗談はやめてください。勝手に決めつけたこと言わないでよ。
Twasan shouted emotionally and stared with determination. However, her gaze quickly fell to the floor, as if repelled.
知ってたんだろ。だから見られたくなかったんじゃないのかい。
Before long, she realized it would be meaningless to say anything in her defense. So Twasan faintly nodded with a fatigued expression on her face.
どうして今までずっと隠してたんだい？相談してくれりゃよかったのにさ。
すみません。私本当はさっき死体を見つけたんです。ここで押し入れを開けた時に。
それじゃあんた黒沢がここで死んでること知ってたってのか？いつから？
黒服の人たちが騒ぎを起こして皆さんが表に出ていた時です。体調が優れなくて枕を出そうと思って押し入れを開けたら匠くんの死体が。
But why hide this fact?
それじゃ俺たちがここへ戻ってきた時にはもう黒沢はここに入ってたってわけか。
ごめんなさい。でも私疑われるのが怖くて。
疑う？なんであんたのことを疑ったりするんだよ。
だって私の他にはここには誰もいないし、見つかったと知られたら先に疑われるのは私だから。
Twasan's voice was hoarse and quivering intermittently. I understand how she must have felt, but doesn't hiding it make it even more suspicious? Yeah, I'd say so.
まったく考えすぎだっての。ちゃんと最初から言ってくれれば俺たちがあんたの証人になってやったのにさ。
すみませんでした。匠くんの死体を見たとき気が動転して何が何だかわからなくなって、自分でも何をどうしたらいいのか判断がつかなくて。
For now, though I was still hesitant, that was enough to explain Twasan's suspicious behavior. But regarding what happened afterwards and who killed Kurosawa,
でも
just then, Otome seemed to have regained his composure and spoke up while rubbing his neck.
なんだ乙部。
いえ、それって変じゃないかなってちょっと。
You noticed it too?
なんだよ変って。
だって黒沢さんは鳥居のところで襲われたんですよね。
Exactly. So if he was attacked out there, how did his corpse end up in here?
どうして犯人はこんなところに運び込んだんでしょう。
そういえばそうだよな。あの銃撃戦の時俺はずっと集会所の玄関にいた。誰にも見られずこの部屋に死体を運び込むことなんて不可能なんじゃねえの？
No, especially since we had one other person here at the time. Thinking it over, a terrible thought crept up on me. It was an absolutely impossible situation for a murder.
そうだよ。いつの間に犯人は死体を運び込んだんだ？
わかりません。鳥居で襲われた直後、皆さんが西宮殿に行って匠くんたちを探している間に犯人はここに運び込んだのでしょうか。
それじゃあ黒沢さんはあの時すでに殺されていた。
おい待てよ、それもちょっとおかしくねえか。西宮殿に俺とみゆきちゃん、乙女もついていこうってことになったのは成り行きだぜ。
Yeah, and right back then, Kurosawa was still alive.
もしも西宮殿に行かずにここに残るなんて誰かが言い出した場合には、犯人はどうするつもりだったんだよ。
犯人の気持ちなんてわかりませんよ。
Tuasen muttered that, then hung her head. Looking at that, we all started to calm our emotional outburst. I can imagine what she's feeling. Finding a corpse right in front of us and setting aside our feelings of sympathy in order to start deducing the circumstances of murder. Is that really human? Here's a thought. There are people outside this place that you're all huddled in that are here and have tried to kill you. On top of that, it's already been confirmed that everybody's been hiding stuff. And one of the things that we just discovered that one person in the group was hiding was a dead body. So, yeah. I would say it's very human here to make sure that we know who exactly our allies are in a dangerous situation like this, and getting to the absolute bottom of everything that's going on around you if you want to get out of there and survive. So if you gotta be a little bit cold to survive, then so be it. That's part of being human too. Surviving. Tuasen approached Kurosawa's corpse and put both her hands on his face.
もっと早くに出してあげればよかったね。ごめんね、匠君。
Though Kurosawa's face was pale, he looked like he was simply asleep and feeling unwell. But the reality was far more cruel.
匠君、疑われるのが怖いだなんて、そんなのダメだよね。ダメだったよね。ごめんね、匠君。
Right after she said that, tears came spilling out to Wada-san once again. But the next moment...
見たところ、傷はどこにもないようじゃないか。
He was poisoned.
黒沢匠はどうやって死んだんだろうね。単純な疑問さ。気になって当然だろ。
園崎さん、そういうこと言うのは今はやめた方が。
おかしいからおかしいって言ってるんだよ。
Sonozaki-san paid no heed to my attempts to keep her in check and continued making her point.
黒沢匠はどうやって殺されちまったんだろうね。刺されたんなら血が出るだろうし、石段から突き落とされたんなら体中泥だらけのはずだろう。なのにこの死体は嫌に綺麗だ。
Which tells me he was killed here, inside the building.
どうしてだろうね。
言われてみれば。
That certainly seemed to be the case. When I looked at his feet, I couldn't see even a trace of mud on his socks or the hem of his pants.
見たところ、この男には何の痕跡もない。死因は一体何なんだろうね。
そんな、どうしてでしょうね。
You know. Tuasen looked back and forth between Otobe and me. All Otobe and I could do was tilt our heads in bewilderment. Checking dead bodies was absolutely out of the question for me. I had no problem with living humans, but as soon as they die, they become a frightening object. Thinking about it that way, I was somewhat alarmed by Miyuki-chan's lack of aversion to looking over the corpse. Investigating corpses is not the kind of job for average people. Before long, Miyuki-chan seemed to finish her investigation. She looked back and spoke in an emotionless clerical tone.
死因は絞殺です。頸部に索状痕がありますから。
But didn't Neon just say there were no physical marks on him?
え
Visible wounds. So, Neon, do you need your eyes checked? Cord markings near his cervical vertebrae? Cervical vertebrae. Meaning his neck. And what are these cord markings?
索状痕はいわゆる細い縄状のもので強く締められた時に発生する痕跡です。主に首を絞めて窒息死させた際に皮膚に浮かび上がる形で見つけることができます。
Miyuki-chan could tell from our faces that we didn't understand, so she offered a detailed expression.
残念ながら彼が死んだのは私たちが黒服たちとやり合っている時間じゃないですね。そして西宮殿に行っている間でもない。死後硬直から見て黒沢くんが死んだのは昨晩の午後9時前後ってところでしょうか。
午後9時前後。
I thought desperately about what Miyuki-chan said as I repeated her words back to her. Until I finally realized.
ちょっと待てよ。その時間なら俺たちがここへ来る前じゃないか。
How the hell can that be, though? We saw him alive and sleeping, didn't we?
ですね。
それは変ですよ。だって見てますよ、僕たち。ねえ荒川さん、そうでしょ。ここで黒沢さん酔いつぶれて寝てたじゃないですか。
Unless you're saying he was dead that entire time.
だから
Otobe was so alarmed by my hysterical exclamation that he turned and looked me straight in the eyes.
どうしたんですか。
もしかしてその時黒沢はも
う。A horrifying thought came rushing out. Kurosawa, who was supposedly sleeping in the corner of the room after heavy drinking, was in fact already dead? If that's the case, then there's only one possibility.
十和田さん、あんた。
She went postal.
私は知らない。何も知りません。本当に知らなかったんです。
いい加減にしなさいよ。
Miyuki-chan grabbed Hawasan by the hand and looked her straight in the eyes. There was no longer any hint of a smile on her face. Her outrage was so horrifyingly powerful that even I was trembling a short distance away.
もう一度だけ聞きます。黒沢さんを殺したのは私たちがここへ来る前。そうよね。
Tawasan's whole body was trembling, but even so, she continued forcefully shaking her head to deny it.
知りません。私、本当に知りません。私じゃない。私はやってない。お願いです。信じてください。
Perhaps driven to her limit by that display, Miyuki-chan turned on her heels and walked out of the room. And, before I could even ask where she was going, she came back. In her hands, wrapped in a handkerchief, she had a rope, roughly 1 meter long.
それは
さっき台所のゴミ箱の中から見つけたの。巧妙に隠してあったから見つけたのは本当に偶然だったけどね。これを警察に届ければ黒沢くんの頸部の皮膚片は確実に出てくる。そしていけないわね。素手で絞めたりなんかしちゃ。
Because you left rope burn on your hands or something, I assume?
ロープの端汗でベタベタになってるわよ。
And DNA traces. As soon as Tawasan heard all that, her eyes opened wide, and she lost her voice. Yuki-chan wasn't simply doubting her. She knew all this from the beginning, and there was no point examining the rope any further. Tawasan's reaction made everything abundantly clear. Dejectedly, Tawasan's eyes were open wide as she stared at the rope. Eventually, she let out a dry laugh. Then, she leaned her back against the wall while muttering to herself.
参ったな。こんなところで探偵みたいな人たちと一緒になっちゃうなんて。せっかくこんな誰も来そうにない場所まで足を運んだってのに。
十和田さん？
あと少しで平穏な生活を取り戻すことができたのに。残念。
Tawasan looked down at Kurosawa's corpse with cold eyes as she dispassionately spoke. She was crying over Kurosawa just a moment ago, but her cold, hard tone made clear that was just an act. Just as Miyuki-chan and Sonozaki-san had realized, that crying earlier was an utter lie.
反町さんのおっしゃる通り、私は皆さんがやってくる前に匠くんを殺しました。
十和田さん、それじゃあ鳥居のところで黒沢さんと一緒に襲われたっていうのも。
もちろん。
Tawasan deeply nodded. Tawasan really is a murderer? Tawasan suddenly felt like a creature from another world. Tawasan looked back at me and smiled, as though she'd perceived my thoughts. Perhaps it was an act of strength from a person who'd been completely driven to the wall with all avenues of escape cut off. But the horrifying smile on her face showed no signs of life. Good lord. I figured that there had to be something strange about these two characters, Otbe and Tawada, but I didn't think they'd have quite this much baggage accompanying them. Like, holy shit. They're both in their own ways pretty scummy. Although, I guess we have yet to hear Tawada's motivation for killing her boyfriend, and going by what little she said, I had to assume, well, also going by that tip I remember seeing a little while back, he was not the best person to be with, and it just drove her to a breaking point. I assume it's something like that. But we're gonna find out whether I am right about that next time, because I'm gonna go ahead and stop things here. We are clearly far from... We are clearly still far from done with all this. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this latest episode of the Higurashi and Nikai console arcs. If you did, and you want to see more content from me, feel free to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. I will see you all next time. Take care.